And welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
It is a beautiful Wednesday morning from here in Lagos. I'm Kaido Kikele.
I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Good morning from Abuja. I'm Maufwe Yusuf.
All right.
Go ahead.
Let's tell you about the bill, finally, the sexual harassment bill for short. But
When you said the bill, it sounded like restaurants or something.
Pay. No, this is actually really important, and it's been in the works for quite some time. You may have been following the Say No to Rape, End Rape campaign, the Me Too movement, and all that. Well, this has partially culminated in the lawmakers in the House of Representatives calling for special courts to try offenses of rape and other sexual violence. Now, that was at the House of Representatives. Basically, he followed the resolution of the House following a matter of urgent public importance by representatives, basically. But at the Senate, the bill, the sexual harassment bill, is being proposed. It has been passed, actually. It passed the third reading, and then it was passed. And this are some of the proposed punitive actions against sexual harassment. So if you don't know, well, you need to get familiar with this. So 14 years imprisonment or 5 million naira fine for sexual harassment. In fact, the minimum is 5 years. You also have 2 years imprisonment or 1 million naira for winking, whistling, and uncomplimentary remarks. So all the catcalling, all the catcalling, all the advances that were hitherto not a big deal. Well, it is now a big deal, and you can see there it can take you to jail for at least 2 years, or you just pay a fine of 1 million naira. You also have 2 years imprisonment or 1 million naira fine for pornographic messages, pictures, or videos sent. So all those WhatsApp deals and what have you that happen, and you just think nobody is watching. Well, that's another issue we'll talk about. Who is watching? How do we ensure that this is enforced? And of course, 2-year jail term or 5 million naira fine for failing to investigate cases of harassment. So saying we don't know about it is not enough. Culpability is also punishable in this particular bill. So the long name is actually a bill for an act to prevent, prohibit, and redress sexual harassment of students in tertiary educational institution and for other matters connected therewith 2019. But for short, we just call it the sexual harassment bill. So I think it's important for us to get familiar with this at the schools. Parents should know this, lecturers, students especially should also know this, because this is going to be our operative document moving forward, the sexual harassment bill. So do you think this answers all those questions?
No, in my opinion. Because, for instance, how does this law deal with the stigmatization? How does this law protect a whistleblower, for instance? Okay, the person who is involved is not protected, but the person who is involved may not be able to talk. But someone who saw it and who decided to blow the whistle, how is that person protected? The law says that the institutions must investigate. Who will give the institutions the information to investigate? Those are other issues that I think it's a fantastic law, no doubt about that. But operationalizing it, that is where I would want to, ask, some serious questions.
So maybe we need to have CCTVs all around, so at least you can document some of these things and know what happens where. So if we have a law and we've pointed some of these potholes out, then we need to actually fix them.
Honestly, sincerely, if you ask me, I'd say let's have a conversation. Well, let the institutions themselves find a way to have some conversations around how this law is going to be operationalized. And then secondly, is it a boy thing or a girl thing at the universities? Most of the time when we talk about rape, we talk about the girl child, the lady, the female. But what if it happens on the other side? How is, so many things spinning in my head right now. But I don't know, Marco, what do you think?
Well, I think that this is an important first step. When you look at how far this bill has come, the fact that it was introduced in the 8th Senate, it was shut down, and now it's now being introduced in the 9th Senate, and maybe because the person who introduced it in the 8th Senate, Senator Ovioma Agege, is now Deputy Senate President, it's been given the importance it deserves, the priority it deserves, because all you have to do is take a look at this book. It's called Naked Abuse, Sex for Grades in African Universities. It was put together by Olusegun Adeniyi, and it details not just in Nigeria, what happens in many tertiary institutions, but also across the African continent. Many examples of cases that have been opened and never, saw the light of day, or some of them who eventually, some of the cases which eventually culminated in jail sentences. But all you have to look at is the level of power play employed by the universities to ensure that, some of these cases died a natural death. So, Ayo, what you've just said is very important in terms of the universities themselves taking an active part in ensuring that they are able to build the confidence that people who will be victims or who have been victims would have or would need to come forward to be able to report, lecturers who are not behaving as they ought to. And note, I use the word students, not just female students, because this can also happen to male students as well. But interestingly, female students have held the short end of the stick for a very long time. So for me, this is an important first step that indeed the Senate of the country, the Nigerian lawmakers recognize that this is a big problem in our universities. When you also look at the stance of ASU when this bill was about to be passed, you will realize that there was really going to be a challenge. The fact that ASU said that, lecturers too could be victims or lecturers could be lured. I mean, a lot of us went through universities. I don't think that any students will want to, create problems for lecturers that are directly supervising them. If you have lecturers in other departments who decide to be randy to you and you know that they have absolutely no control, even that by itself is a big problem. Not to now talk of the people who are your direct lecturers. So here, one of the important things we notice in this bill is that it removes the situation of consent. It says that a student cannot consent to have slept with his or her lecturer because, if you listen to the report, you will hear why the Deputy Senate President says, it's a catch-22 situation for any student who is approached by his or her lecturer to say, what, would you like to have a relationship with me? And that is if they're even that kind of polite. So for me, I think that this is an important bill. That has now been passed by the Senate. It first of all recognizes where we are in terms of these conversations around rape that we have been having since the death of Uwa, a university student who was killed close to her home, in a church. Barakat Bello, who was also a student who was raped and murdered in her home in Ibadan. So it recognizes that this is about an important time, and it's also a time when the federal government said they've declared a state of emergency on rape, even though I'm yet to understand really what that means. So I think it also, brings it up that, we've not forgotten about this issue. It is important, and one of the places where we must set examples is our tertiary institutions. Really, we should not have room for this sort of thing in our universities. Gentlemen.
Yes, it's good for us to do something about some of these things, but yes, it's a step, but sometimes you look at this and you wonder, could this step have been taken a little better? For instance, if you look at where we are, some of the examples you've given, Mark, can this bill cover them? Because this is for tertiary institutions. It's happening in a wider society. What's going to happen to those cases? The hue and cry concerning those ladies who unfortunately raped and killed, happened outside. Can this law apply if it didn't happen within tertiary institutions? And it speaks to a larger problem. Many have talked about the Child Rights Act. It talked about several other perspectives in terms of why that is a societal problem. So people could, yes, there will always be lacuna in different laws, and we'll always seek to improve, amend, and ensure we do the right things, because many were actually expecting that this will have a nationwide effect. But limiting it to tertiary institutions, well, one wonders what their intention was, because if you look at some of those provisions, winking, whistling, making comments about someone's physique, and sometimes, you look at it and ask yourself, look, if someone winks, and assuming, maybe it's a scenario, look, it's not been tested yet, so we're just being hypothetical about some of these things. And you prove that now, that look, if you wink at me, this is so. Some of these
As I
things,
said, yeah,
it's something that we need to be sure that they are enforceable.
It's the
And not make a
operationalizing.
mockery of intention.
Operationalizing it is something that will definitely be an issue. Well, of course, some of the larger society, as you mentioned, we remember that there is such a law in Lagos about the society, sexual offences law in Lagos. I don't know if that exists all over the place. And we also had this discussion once when some people were telling us that there are sections of the police that have that are assigned for such special cases. Well, it's a good thing to even consider that, but to imagine that such will happen without reprimand, I think that really is the problem.
Because remember, the last time the NGF held one of their meetings, they said they were going to declare an emergency and see how different states, the states that have not domesticated the relevant laws against child abuse and sexual violence,
The
they were going
Violence
to
Against
do that.
Persons Act also.
Exactly. They said that was going to happen. So one wonders why this didn't have that broader perspective. It's a societal challenge. And so we need to approach it from that perspective. Because look, there's a school of thought that said, look, if this was a wider society, they're not sure Senate would have been this fast to pass it. But because it's in tertiary institutions, which they may not have direct, but look, it's just some of those perspectives out there. It's important to take a step, but I think we could have done it a little better in terms of addressing it.
This covers tertiary institutions. Does that mean if it happens to a student of a tertiary institution
Not
outside
within the premises?
the premises,
How does it apply? It
Well,
won't apply.
Definitely, there are other laws that are meant to cover that. But I think the challenge also has been some of these laws are hardly enforceable. If you take a look at convictions of rapes and compare that with reports and, a lot of issues around rape, you realize that convictions are way less than the reports and, the statements that have been written saying that this person, sexually violated me and what have you. So that's the issue with these laws. But, for the tertiary institutions, I think it's important for them to come out and say, well, now that this law has been passed, this is how we would follow through. And I think this would actually mean a lot.
And if you're going to follow through, don't forget, too, the questions about why were these cases not reported? Because the police will tell you, look, there's a huge challenge enforcing some of these laws. What about the capacity of the police authorities to enforce this? Because this definitely, if it now becomes law by both houses, the police are the ones who are going to eventually take this matter up. What kind of capacity do they have? And then if we have to go, it's a cycle. I mean, there's the psychology of the people who are involved in these things. Yes, it's a step, but we need to also see what is the thought to ensure that we make that full circle, such that those who stigmatize them, those who are supposed to investigate, will not have the kind of mindset which will jeopardize that investigation and the intent of the drafters of this law. So it's something that we really need to look at and see, look, yes, but does this, can it go the whole hog?
And don't forget, the president hasn't signed into law yet.
Not yet.
That's another hurdle to cross. But you know what? We'll see what comes out and comes up in the coming days.
But it's going to be pretty important. So they need to also look at it and ensure that, it has that broader perspective, which you guys have already highlighted, such that it happens to men, it happens to women, it happens to boys, it happens to girls. They need to also approach it in that
if
way.
you guys don't mind, this is probably just one of those things, but what if it happens in a secondary school? Does this law cover? Or are there pre-existing laws? Because it does happen in secondary schools as well.
There's meant to be other laws, the Violence Against Persons Act, which not all states, of course, have domesticated. But of course, this is also in other laws that don't bear that name, sexual violence. But you know what?
So there you go. It's a big challenge, societal one, and we should approach it as such, not just piecemeals. They have the capacity, the National Assembly, to make it a nationwide approach. Why can't we do that? So if you do this, some say it's tokenism, as some lawyers will say. But it's important, don't forget that. It's important we take this step, but it could have been a lot better. The capacity, forensics, guys. Look, that's several things.
What
what
you just mentioned now, again, reminds me of a conversation we had here with a retired police officer who said, look, guys, when you go through the police system, police training system, your introductory level, you go to all, you're on a general beat, but you're supposed to graduate into some specialties, one of which is these sexual offenses, because it's a very, very difficult thing to prove. How do you prove rape? How do you prove it was with consent? How do you prove forensic information that you just... How do you prove
I could have a medical condition and I wink and you think I'm winking at you. And,
so many. So it's a special area to investigate, and it needs some specialty. If this law has come, I hope it can also provide for that specialty of the
I think perhaps in the future, some of the things that people should do, maybe if we have a focus group conversation with ladies and guys separately, and ask them, look, having seen this bill, do you think, if you've been a victim of this, do you think you will be confident enough to report any of these cases, having seen this law? Does it give you that confidence to come forward and report? What would you like to see that you haven't seen? Haven't seen some of the highlights of that bill. So perhaps that could be a way. I mean, they call it copy testing in advertising. So you do that, you find out if the intention of what you want to put out is what it is. You test it with people. If it's not, then you... But in any case, let's take a look at the report.
The National Assembly is considering the best options to tackle the surge in rape and gender-based violence in the country. In the House of Representatives, a lawmaker canvasses for speedy trial of cases involving rape and gender-based violence.
If these cases are concluded within months or even weeks, with strong conviction to back up the conviction, it will have a massive effect on those who are nursing the intention to commit similar crimes. Special courts could be set up to fully harness the law and ensure accelerated hearings so that Nigerians will know that the laws will be applied quickly and fully. The delay in the trial has serious psychological impact on the victims and mostly the minors.
Those in support, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Ayes have it.
Many victims of rape and gender-based violence in Nigeria have complained about the slow and difficult process of getting justice, and many believe this has further emboldened perpetrators, which could be responsible for the surge in recent times. Meanwhile, sexual harassment in Nigerian schools, especially tertiary institutions, has also been brought to the fore in recent times.
The ayes have it.
The Senate has passed a bill which criminalizes the act of neglect or failure of administrative heads of tertiary educational institutions to address complaints of sexual harassment within a specified period of time.
Create a strict liability offense by removing mutual consent as a defense in the prosecution of sexual harassment cases in tertiary educational institutions, and maintain and sustain the fiduciary relationship that exists between educators and students.
We're not trying to say that because of that special relationship between a lecturer and a student, it is difficult, almost impossible, for a student to say no to a lecturer. Because when the student does that, it is either she succumbs, in which case she pays the price, or if she does not succumb, she may be in that institution for 7-8 years.
But some senators express reservations over certain sections in the bill.
As we are trying to protect the female students, who must be seen to be protecting some innocent lecturers. Some innocent lecturers. In these days of internet, a lecturer can easily be set up. We have to be very, very careful.
The lawmakers say the consideration of more viable options is because already existing laws do not seem to deter perpetrators, especially since some states have not domesticated these laws. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Take a look at some of this as quick as we can. Tribune, for instance, the lead story here, they continue where they left off. Magus probe creates uncertainty in EFCC. So that is what you see here this morning about this big lead here today. But look at the riders now. Presidential probe panel. Presidential probe panel sitting enters day 2. Presidency mum on his reported suspension. You see that as well. Anti-corruption chief moves belongings out of office. Security operatives search his house. He must be treated fairly. This is from Serap now. And then he must be sacked now, says coalition of lawyers. So you have all of that on the front page, the big lead with the Tribune. Reps to probe NNPC over $1.05 billion illegal withdrawal from NLNG account. By the way, has anyone seen that perspective or that material that the NLNG may not, they might what's that word again, up until next year in terms of the production and things like that, but we'll bring that to you much later. See the impact that COVID seems to be having on some of these things. And then this is still out there, 774,000 jobs. Keyamo again disagrees with Senate as Ngige apologizes. So there you go. The Tribune this morning. Mark,
Let's quickly take a look at leadership for you. You see there, top police officers lobby to take over from Magu. Sometimes, you just have to say, someone isn't even dead yet. They want to take over. As presidency suspends EFCC acting chairman. So he's been suspended. That has happened already. He says his probe shows nobody is above the law. It's on page 4 for you. You also see a number of other stories on the corner there. Senate passes sexual harassment bill into law. Reps seek speedy prosecution of culprits. And I think that the reps taking a look at the wider society, which Chamberlain is canvassing for. Interestingly, ASU had about the same stance that you had, Chamberlain, about taking a wider look instead of trying to victimize tertiary institutions, it would seem. But some people said, no, tertiary institutions need to set the way. Besides, they're always making noise about autonomy. So if they're not autonomous in this regard, why do they now want to be a part of larger society when it comes to rape and sexual harassment? Looking at other issues here, COVID-19, federal government releases 3,789 inmates. Okay. Can calls for reopening of churches and states. Brazil's president tests positive for coronavirus. Don't forget the stance that he had maintained before now about the virus just being a little flu. Well, we wish him quick recovery from the little flu. Looking at the corner there, Senate passes sexual harassment bill into law. Okay, that's taken ready. Drama as Kondo Assembly serves deputy governor impeachment notice. Is at the corner as well. Imo lawmakers begin moves to remove speaker. Why? Well, you might want details inside leadership. Let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
Yeah, so there you go. That as fast as we can. We're back in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, we're keeping our focus on the questioning of the acting chairman of the EFCC. Even though as we speak, you never can tell. Status may change quick and fast because things are really happening so fast. We're joined this morning by Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, at the moment, because, the reports indicating that even members of the commission seem to be at a loss as to what to do because Mr. Magu hasn't instructed anybody else, to stand in his stead. Many are wondering what's going to happen to his status. Is he still acting? How long will this probe go on for? So much, as some daily say, uncertainty about what is playing out. How are you internalizing all of this as they are playing out?
Well, for me, even though Mr. Ibrahim Magu is presumed innocent of all the allegations leveled against him, it is an anticlimax for an anti-corruption czar to be linked to the miasma of corrupt practice. No doubt, the fate that has befallen Magu so far, for me, is indeed a moral disaster for the anti-corruption crusade of the government. Therefore, the ongoing investigation should be a wake-up call on the federal government to embark on a comprehensive house cleaning exercise. Otherwise, the investigation will be a selective exercise in futility. And I think the federal government owes the public a duty, particularly that institution. If it is confirmed that Mr. Magu has been asked to step aside, there has to be, following the law establishing the agency, the topmost officer in the agency should be asked to continue to act for him. A mistake must never be made this time around, whereby an outsider is appointed in an acting capacity for years. That error must be avoided this time around. So what one will expect is for the secretary of the commission, who is the head, who should be the head of the administration for now, to be asked to act in the interim, so that when the government nominates a new person, the name or the nomination will be sent to the Senate, so that we do not make the same mistake. For me, I think that is the way we should go. But the panel should also try as much as possible, to carry out a thorough investigation, so that the agency and the country can draw the relevant lessons from this unfortunate incident.
When you talk about morality, are you seeing it as a two-edged sword? Because some say the statement attributed to the presidency is indicating that under this administration, nobody is above scrutiny. And for there to be, even if it's 22 allegations against the acting chairman of the EFCC that is being investigated, isn't that a dent or a question mark on that office? And so if the authorities are following the law, what role does morality play here?
No, my position is that, yes, I agree, nobody should be above the law or above scrutiny. But in an atmosphere where impunity reigns supreme, that principle must be applied at all times. I mean, if you're talking of illegal killing of policemen in Taraba State, the soldiers involved must be brought to book, and all those who violate the rights of our people, apart from those who engage in corrupt practices. So, and that's why I said earlier, this ongoing exercise must not end with Magu. We must now begin, the regime must now show and demonstrate the readiness to embark on a comprehensive house cleaning, so that Nigerians will not continue to allege selective arrest and prosecution of corrupt elements in the government and outside the government. I mean, that's my own position. But having regards to the way and manner EFCC chairman or chairperson have been removed since the time of Mr. Nuhu Ribadu, there is now a challenge before the government to look at the entire architecture, and see that we do not, even though Mr. Magu is the only one that is facing the presidential panel, but I do know that in the case of Mr. Nuhu Ribadu, all manners of investigations were carried out. But at the end of the day, he was found to be as clean as snow, even though he made his own errors, like, all human beings. So this time around, Mr. Magu holds himself a duty to come out clean and ensure that he cooperates fully with the investigation panel, so that these allegations will be thoroughly investigated, and the law has to take its course,
Yeah, but the thing about this too, Mr. Falana, is that can we consider them as just errors, because these allegations are weighty if there was under declaration of the amount of monies that have been recovered, disobedience to court orders, insubordinations. These are very weighty allegations, don't you think?
No, of course, they're extremely weighty allegations. But I'm saying for us to avoid another person exercising such wide powers without inhibition, without accountability, we must now look at why did you get to this mess? And that is why I'm going to say that henceforth, the board of the EFCC, by virtue of Section 2 of the EFCC Act, there is supposed to be a 25-member board of that agency. Why has the board not been working? Against Section 2037 of the EFCC Act provides that not later than September of every year, the EFCC shall submit its annual report to the National Assembly. Have the reports been submitted? Are they debated? Were suggestions made to correct errors or infractions of the law? And these are the points I'm making. Otherwise, it's going to be a vicious cycle.
You know, it is on, I mean, the same commission, EFCC, under Mr. Ibrahim Magu, that the government has said, well, we're fighting corruption over the past couple of years. The same man, and apparently, I mean, DSS had released a report in 2016 casting a shadow on his integrity. But apparently, over time, it seems the president has trusted him beyond all doubt. So looking at some of these allegations and what have you, do you think it casts a doubt or a shadow of doubt on the activities and some of the gains of the EFCC in this couple of years?
Well, there is no doubt that the ongoing investigation has put a question mark on the integrity of the agency in carrying out its assignment. And that is why the government must move very quickly to draw a line of dichotomy between the individuality of Mr. Ibrahim Magu and the institution, so that the entire gains recorded by the EFCC over the years will not be thrown away with the baby you won't throw away the baby and the bathwater. And that is why these very serious allegations must be thoroughly investigated. Again, as I said, in an atmosphere of lack of accountability, the tendency is to be there. The tendency is there to abuse powers. And that is why the accountability agencies must do its work. Must do their work so that we won't repeat this very tragic experience.
If I can go back a bit, it appears as though these powers were given to him by the president. He obviously had the full backing of the president because, he can't operate in isolation. He didn't get there himself. So again, obviously he had the backing of the president. So what seemed to have changed?
No, the president will not back corrupt practices on the part of any individual. The law has created an agency that has the powers of arrest, of investigation, of prosecution, and even of disposal of forfeited assets. These are enormous powers that will now require a review. What the law had envisaged was that the 25-member board of the agency, which constituted, the board of the agency is constituted by all relevant financial statutory bodies, including the DM, including the State Security Service, the police, the central bank, and so on and so forth, and 4 eminent Nigerians of unimpeachable integrity to sit as a board and review the activities of the organization from time to time. But I'm saying the board is not working. Secondly, the EFCC is required by Section 37 of the Establishment Act to submit an annual report told both chambers of the National Assembly, one would have expected that the relevant committees of both houses will scrutinize the reports with a view to ensuring that the organization does not depart from its core objectives.
At the moment, we do have Mr. Norrison Quakers, a senior advocate of Nigeria, joining us as well this morning. Good morning, Mr. Quakers, and thank you for joining us today. Now,
good morning, my pleasure.
Okay, so as this is playing out now, there's so much that people are trying to figure out in terms of the implications and the gravity of what is going on. What do you think of this whole process?
Well, for me, I must say that the part of my brother's comment, Mr. Femi Falana, that Mr. Ayo, Honorable Justice Ayo, who happens to be the chairman of the panel, will be seen to be fair and just. I don't think, and I keep saying it, that once you read any sort of political undertone or undercurrent to what is going on, that it is a president's prerogative. You recall that when the Senate refused to confirm him, the presidency went ahead and said that he's an appointee of the president. And as such, even the Senate in this position to allow the chairman to continue was rebuffed. And so he's continued in office. Now, what is going on is simply this. I mean, if we go by what we have read and information that we have, is to the fact that he's been investigated. And when he's been investigated, he's been asked to step aside, and so that he will not have access to information within his reach, so that usually, like, you don't want to tamper with information. If it comes out, if after the investigation it comes out clean, right, everyone will know that he's not guilty as been alleged. But allegation has been made. It is imperative for the chairman or the committee to look into it to ascertain and confirm if those allegations can be substantiated or true.
But if you... Okay, go ahead.
So just a quick one. You mentioned the political end of the whole conversation. And that seems like, as Mr. Femi Falana also referenced, something that seems to be, quote-unquote, normal with every top dog at the EFCC. How much of this is political and how much is legal?
You know, I started by saying that I don't want us to read political undertone to what is going on. Now, for me, it is legal because allegations have been made. The president stepped in, set up a panel, and the panel is currently investigating him. Now, because he's an appointee of the president, it is the president's prerogative to look into all of this. If at the end of the day he is not found guilty, he'll be given a clean bill. Now, if he's found guilty, that's the end of his continuation as chairman of the commission. So the legal aspect is the fact that there is a presidential committee that has been set up to investigate allegations made against the chairman of a corrupt, anti-corrupt institution, anti-corrupt agency set up by the president to look into financial crimes. And so if the chairman of that institution is now being accused of financial impropriety or abuse of office and a number of other things, it stands to reason, without necessarily taking him to court, the president has the power. He set up a panel and the panel is investigating him. If the panel at the end of the day gives him a clean bill, he goes back to continue. Or if not, the president will just appoint somebody else. Mind you, he's yet to be confirmed. He's been in acting capacity for quite a while. And the president stood by him all this while to say, look, this is the person I want for the job. And so you can't impose someone else on me. So if the president has appointed him, and the president is now saying that because of allegations against him, he must be investigated, I think it's just fair and just that we allow the process to run its course.
What then do you say to those who feel that this is some power play between Mr. Ibrahim Magu and the Minister of Justice? Because, I mean, you also remember that there is this member of the Presidential Advisory Council on Anti-Corruption who thinks it's a power play. What do you say to that?
You say, look, I'll be honest with you. You can't overrule such considerations or such sentiments or talk. And our system is such that we read meanings into everything. There's always some consideration for either political, religion, ethnic, etc. Now, but we need to understand this. Has there been an allegation against the person of Ibrahim Magu? Now, we read a while back, even when the SY chairman, Waziri, Farida Waziri, said a number of things that were also not complimentary at that time, that he was being investigated, blah, 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 but nothing came out of it. Now, a president who appointed him, mind you, these allegations have always been there, but nothing really happened. So if the president is now saying that, look, a panel should look into the allegations against this man. Now, you must also understand that the game has since changed. Perhaps maybe new players have come on board, and they feel that, look, this is something that the president must also look into. Ibrahim Gambari, the new the new staff, you will recall, said some things that, look, it's no longer going to be business as usual, that his role is to ensure that he advises the president correctly. Now, if you notice in recent times, there have been some changes in terms of policy thoughts of this government. It might not be perfect, but you can see a number of things that there's a consciousness to do what is right. So if an allegation has been made against the chairman of an anti-corruption agency, right, and that this is a government that is attempting or trying to project an image of anti-corruption, right? Now, if the chairman has been accused, it's naturally followed that he should be investigated. Yes, there could be power play, but I don't want to look at the constellation in terms of power play.
Okay, so what we'll do, gentlemen, we'll go to break, but we'll come back to all of you and then get your perspectives moving forward. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Sunrise Today. We're keeping our focus on the continued questioning of the acting chairman of the EFCC, Mr. Ibrahim Magu, for the second day. Let's get back to Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Well, some of the allegations out there, the report indicates that the Attorney General of the Federation did say that the acting chairman, one of the accusations leveled against him is that he said to have recovered the total of 504 billion naira, but lodged 543 billion naira in the recovery account to the CBN. And then this fans the embers of some school of thought that said, look, benefit of hindsight now, that report by the DS said that did indicate that he was not fit to be in that office, that if, no matter what happens with this investigation, some are thinking for the integrity and for the sake of that office and our fight against corruption, he shouldn't be seen to go back to that office. Do you agree with that?
Well, I fully agree with my learned friend, Mr. Kwaka's essay, that an investigation is being conducted. If at the end of the day is found not liable, the government may feel that he should go back to the office. But if is indicted, one way or the other, the law will have to take its course. There's no sentiment about it. We must be fair to all and sundry. All that Mr. Ibrahim Magu requires at this stage is to be given the opportunity to defend himself. These are allegations, even though serious allegations, but they remain allegations until they are proven, in this case, beyond all reasonable doubt. But the law is on his side. It's been given all the opportunity to make a representation and defend the allegations. That is all that the law requires at this stage. If it's not found liable, of course, the government may feel, okay, you should go back. He may now on his own feel, oh, I have been sufficiently embarrassed. I want to go back to the police. But this is not the first time that an EFCC chairman has been investigated. And there should be no reading of political motivations to all this exercise. Is the prerogative of the government to investigate allegations of misconduct or corruption or abuse of office. And the public, because this is a public office, we must also ensure that due process is followed. And once due process is followed, nobody can accuse the government of malafide, bad faith. That is the way I think this whole exercise should be viewed.
Staying with this acting issue, yes, the National Assembly failed to confirm him substantive, as it were. Do you think that acting, toga perhaps might have hindered some of his activities in office? I mean, did that come to play any role whatsoever in his activities or achievement or otherwise in office?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, again, you have to look at the whole, our experience with this matter, in this matter. His acting capacity was challenged in court, and the Federal Court ruled that the president has the powers under Section 171 of the Constitution to appoint him. But people have raised the question whether you can act beyond the 4-year tenure of the office, I think that one is also a question to address. But the president is empowered to appoint an officer in an acting capacity, but that cannot provide an opportunity, right, as it were, to conduct yourself in the office without being questioned. And I think that is what is going on.
Mr. Fernando, do you agree with some lawyers believe that he has already been indicted by that DSS report? So the question of if he's indicted doesn't really arise.
No, I think there is a problem here. And I think the government also owes Nigeria an explanation. Following the SSS report, the government claimed to have investigated the allegations, and the letter was even sent to the Senate that you have been cleared. But I want to believe that after that letter to the Senate, the government now went back, to look at the allegations once again. The government has now said there is a basis to investigate. As far as the government is concerned, there is what you call a prima facie case for investigation. And that is the exercise that is going on, which must be supported, even by Mr. Magui himself. He needs to clear his own name, which has been marred in, mud.
Let's take this back to Mr. Falana then and see if he can at least respond to this question, and then we can move on. The EFCC over time has been said to be more reactive than proactive. Does the EFCC have the power to initiate action on its own without getting any report or any complaint from anybody about a person's activity?
Well, as far as the law is concerned, particularly Section 7 of the EFCC Act, the Commission is empowered to investigate anybody suspected to have enriched himself through engagement in economic and financial crimes, and that will include corruption. And what the EFCC has done over the years is to adopt both styles, both methods of investigation, either on the basis of petitions or based on reports, even reports read in the newspapers. The EFCC has had to move. Sometimes the EFCC, through the instrumentality of mutual legal assistance, has received requests from abroad through the Office of the Attorney General to investigate certain Nigerians, alleged to be involved in economic and financial crime. So there is no hard and fast rule about this. So the EFCC has been proactive and reactive, and this is allowed by law.
Does that then give teeth to those allegations of late action on certain cases, such as the one involving the musician Naira Marley, and not providing enough, evidence about certain things?
Again, these are allegations being investigated, and it will be unfair to engage in judgmental analysis, until the panel that has been empowered or, assigned to do this work by the president concludes his work. For now, I am not in a position to comment on the merit or otherwise of any of the allegations. It won't be fair. I cannot usurp the functions of the panel. Neither can I make prejudicial or statements that will be prejudicial to the right of Mr. Ibrahim Magu to fly here.
But the way the whole thing is playing itself out now, Mr. Falana, do you think we'll have an opportunity to address some of the things that played out prior to his confirmation as to whether or not he can be in an acting capacity? Because as it is now, if he doesn't go back to that office, can he be entitled to anything in terms of his entitlements? As an acting person, I thought it's only when he's substantive that you can be referred to as a former chairman, and there you go get your entitlements if you leave the office. But as it is now, isn't it dicey as a result of all of that scenario that played out, which left him in an acting capacity till date?
Serving police officer seconded to the EFCC. If the government no longer requires his services in the EFCC, he goes back to the police. Ceteris paribus. I mean, all things being equal. So he hasn't lost anything, or he wouldn't have lost anything.
All right, let's take this back to Mr. Quickers now, see if he can hear us now. How do you respond to some of these things? Do you think it is substantive enough for him to, for the organization, under Magu or any other, to be proactive as opposed to just waiting for reports or anything before taking any action?
You remember I started by saying that the Process of Crime Act, for instance, in the United Kingdom, empowers the Financial Intelligence Unit to investigate anyone, not necessarily based on a report. And so the EFCC is also empowered in like manner to do the same. The most important thing is that investigation will be conducted and the suspect will be invited, questions will be asked, and then the report will be done. If it is found weighty, the suspect will be charged accordingly to court. And that's what we describe by due process. So it's imperative that we understand it in like manner, that the EFCC is not a toothless bulldog. It's also very effective. Another Magu, in fairness, EFCC has also lived up to his societal perception assessment. Yeah, I won't consider the organization as being weak, neither would I describe it as being toothless. Ineffective, also very, very effective under Magu. And you recall that the Zambian professor gave EFCC a pass mark. And globally, EFCC has also been recognized as being so very effective, particularly under Magu. And I give that to him. I will not sit here and join others in tarnishing the image of the anti-corruption agency because Magu is being investigated. So for me, I think that we can't describe the organization as not being proactive. It's indeed being proactive. I know cases of persons who have been invited based on their means of livelihood, the need for them to come, and not necessarily based on the report. But sometimes when you want to have political consideration, you now hear people say things like, why can't they investigate this person? But forgetting the fact that there are times when they work on petition, there are times on their own. The law empowers them to also ask questions. If a civil servant, for instance, has a private jet, is it not worth investigating? Is it not worth asking questions? What's his means of livelihood? How did he end up buying a private jet? How did he end up building a house, a palatial home? And what is his means of livelihood? So to me, to that extent, I think the EFCC has also been proactive.
But as it is now, you think that all of that, whatever he might have achieved, could be tainted? Whichever way, depending on the way the pendulum swings about this panel's investigation. Because if he spent 2 days in custody, so that is already tarnishing certain things, don't you think? Because if the panel now says, no, you've been found guilty, will people still refer to all of that? Wouldn't they say, look, we told you about the mode of operation, which some lawyers had questioned before now?
I like the way Mr. Femi Falana put it. If at the end of the day, mind you, he has a place that he can always fall back to. If at the end of the day he feels that, look, my image has been tarnished, I can no longer continue, he can do two things. If he's pulled out of the EFCC, even if they say go back and he says, no, I'm not going back, he can also go as far as saying that, look, he doesn't want to serve again in the police force. And then he puts in his letter and then retires, that his image has been tarred. But I also don't want us to rejoice or be happy that someone is being pulled out. Investigation is ongoing because allegations have been made against him. And so if at the end of the day he's not found guilty, he might decide. But you see, our society is an environment where people don't do things honorably. If he decides that, look, I don't want to continue with this work, I want to just go and live a private life, I think I've had enough for public service. It's his prerogative. He can choose to do so. He can choose to do so. So let's not read meanings into all of this. Yes, his image at the end of the day might be tarred, but if he's not found guilty, if he's asked to step aside because he's being investigated, and some people now will now read that to me, no, that it was because he was found guilty. Mr. Ayos and the Honorable Justice Ayos investigate thoroughly, and I know him as a very fair chance. If at the end of the day his name is clear, and that's the end of the matter. But and then there's something again Mr. Falana said, which I totally agree with. You must understand this, that he has not been indicted. He has made allegations have been made against him. The process of unearthing the allegation has commenced. And so we can't read meaning into all of this. Now,
Mr. Quickers, the thing about this is this. Pardon me to jump in, but the thing about it is this. In this society, we know people will always read meanings into things. Even when normally, as a citizen, if you have an invitation from the EFCC, people read meaning into that alone. So what can anyone do about that? Should we leave this to the acting chairman of the EFCC? Because there's an impression, there's a perception that people have about that office. And with this development now, there's equally a perception. So should he resign for the sake of that office at the moment?
Like I said, if at the end of it all, because you see, he's going through a process, what you call a cleansing process. It comes out of it untainted, unsoiled, right? What is expected to do is, look, I've been scandalized, I've been traumatized, I can no longer continue in this office. And then he puts in his letter. But at least the report is then out there that he was not found guilty. And that's the end of the matter. For me, that's the end of it. For perception, there's nothing you can do. The mere fact that I know a friend of mine whose son said to his dad when he saw his classmate friend on TV being taken for prostitution, he looked at his dad and said, oh, I didn't know my friend's father is a criminal. Now, for him, the perception is that, oh, his friend's dad has been arrested and been tried. Now, the man wasn't found guilty. It's just mere perception that anybody who is exposed to facing the law is already adjudged a criminal. And then you flip the body. It's for him to establish that he's innocent and not that his perception, so that perception is guilty, and he has to establish that he's innocent. So these are some of the problems with our society in terms of perception. But there's nothing you can do about perception.
Right. Well, let's see if we can broaden this conversation. And we have joining us this morning also via Zoom, Abiodun Owonikoko, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Mr. Owonikoko, thank you for joining us this morning. Well, we've talked largely about the process leading up to where we are right now today. And, you know, for some people, they're looking at the big picture. They're saying that maybe this brings up that conversation around having strong institutions as opposed to strong individuals, as it were, because it appears as though this is what this is about, strong individual as opposed to strong institution. Do you think that debate is worth looking into right now, not just for the EFCC, but across board?
Thank you. I believe that the EFCC as a commission has suffered from misrepresentation of his mandate in the public arena, simply because of justifiable discontent with the way corruption appears to have enveloped our society in a manner that institutions seem incapable of addressing it. So we tend to put the EFCC in historical part of regimes, Ribadu time, Waziri time, Lamode time, and now Magu time. In reality, this was a body created by law as an institution clearly charged with the function of confronting financial crimes and economic crimes. And the personalization of leadership has been the bane of that institution. So that each time people seem to complain about EFCC, you see that they normally identify an individual as their albatross in EFCC rather than seeing it as an institution. I don't recall a situation where people would look at FBI and they would then attack the leadership as the cause of their woes. The reason it has been so in Nigeria is because we have personalized that office. Unfortunately, giving the credit to the present regime to actually fight corruption, they did not appear to have moved from that perception. And that's why we're having this problem. Otherwise, the issue of investigating certain activities in it would be a routine matter. As you would recall, we copied this system from essentially Singapore. And in Singapore, a different body entirely is the ombudsman that oversees EFCC outside of EFCC's operation itself. In Nigeria, we created an EFCC in which the body itself is its own supervisor, with the exception, with the little room for the Attorney General and Supervising Ministry to once in a while intervene. Now that means from time to time, and there has not been that oversight, which, if not for the unfortunate friction between the executive and the legislature, should have been played by the National Assembly. Now let's look at what we have here. For 5 good years, somebody has been chairman and accounting officer of EFCC who has not been validly appointed because his appointment took legality from having been confirmed by the Senate. It never happened. So he's been acting for a period of 5 years when even substantive tenure for EFCC chairman should be 4 years. So we have today a situation where, because of this development now, by the time whatever happens to the inquiry, we will have to start, it will have be a begin again exercise, which is very unfortunate. The trajectory of success achieved, where we have had high profile criminal suspects being prosecuted successfully and sent to jail, and which, if anybody will be fair and honest, has given EFCC a good visage in the public arena. So we must from now address some of the key structural problems in the composition of EFCC itself. I recall that before the last tenure of the last Senate, there had been this law, this bill that was in the pipeline to address some of these inadequacies of the EFCC, particularly the head of the EFCC. Why do we limit the pool to persons of the rank of Assistant Commissioner of Police, forgetting that this is an individual that will have control over even the president when it comes to investigation of crimes, the governors. At the state level, does an AC relate directly with the governor? At the state level. So there is something to be addressed about the qualification for appointment as chairman of the EFCC. You can bring a young man there and it will make all the difference if he has all the enthusiasm and the commitment to work. So I'm not necessarily saying that anybody below the rank of Commissioner of Police or AC may not. But I think, given what we have seen, immaturity has severely damaged the image of EFCC by those who use best practice and international standards to judge this activity. So I'll say that as we have today, the president has a right under the Act to remove any member of the board of the commission, including chairman, on grounds of inability to perform the function of his office or in the interest of the public. What we are going through presently is an inquiry An inquiry does not actually constitute a trial, which will lead to conviction. And this inquiry is also an indictment on the functionality of the government, because you know that EFCC is a statutory reporting body to National Assembly, and its activity ought to be audited and audited every year. Because of the conflict between the executive and legislature for the past 5 years, it has suited some people to allow it to run, as a law on its own. So this constant annual check on its activity has not happened in the last 4 years, because the Senate cannot be expected to be asking EFCC to come and report to it when they don't even agree that it has a legally appointed chairman. So while the president might have good reasons, he did not want to bend, it also exposes the EFCC to a lot of weaknesses over the past 5 years, which some people internally might have actually exploited. And that's what we are seeing, without prejudice to the outcome of the panel of inquiry. Don't forget, that inquiry can only come up with a recommendation. And
all right, Mr. Wendigoko, my apologies, but we'll come back to you and others, Mr. Falana and Mr. Quakers, to get your concluding thoughts on that subject matter when we return in just a moment. Please stay with us. All right, welcome back. It's our concluding moments now with the gentleman. Let's start with Mr. Femi Falana. Give us your concluding thoughts. Now, Nigerians want fairness and justice. You alluded to process as well to be seen to be of such. But from part of what Mr. Wendigoko was saying, that, look, it does appear as though this panel, they will have a limit from the points of law. First, do we expect that they finish without a recommendation? And if they do, shouldn't the case then go to a proper court? Because some of these things have got the border on corruption as well.
Well, I think the point my learned colleague, Mr. Biodo Wendigoko, has made is that at the end of the day, the panel can only make recommendations to the president. It is the prerogative of the president to accept the report and the recommendations or reject them, or if there are allegations of indictment, the president may then say, okay, maybe we should go to the court of law. But again, as I said earlier, there's nothing going on now that is strange. In the case of Mr. Nuhu Ribadu, he was asked to proceed to Kuru for a course. He completed the course on the day of the graduation. The government, the Yar'Adua government, moved Vietnamese violently to yank him off the queue. He had his wife and his family and his children, but they removed him from the queue. As if that was not enough, he was tried before the Code of Conduct Tribunal. I defended him, and we produced his asset declaration form because they said he never declared. Now, from there, he was dismissed as a police officer, as an assistant inspector general of police. It was my learned friend, Tayo Yetimbo, who defended him. At the end of the day, the Jonathan administration reviewed the entire problem and discovered that it was proceeded against. The Code of Conduct case was discontinued and dismissed by the court. His rank was restored, and I expect that in this case, if Mr. Ibrahim Magu is found not guilty, at the end of the day, he will either be asked to go back to the police force or be asked to continue in office. But if the other were run, again, the law has to take its course. There's no sentiment about it. But like my friend, learned friend, Mr. Quakers has said, the EFCC has made tremendous progress in the last 5 years, which cannot be rubbish. And that is why I said earlier, we must not throw away the baby and the bathwater. We must allow this process to run its full course. At the end of the day, the public must know where we move from there. But the final point, whether we want to allow this system to remain or not, the accountability mechanisms put in place by the law must be made to function. Whether the Senate had confirmed Mr. Ibrahim Magu or not in the last 5 years, there is a statutory duty that the report of activities of the EFCC must be monitored, must be debated annually Two, there is a board of 25 members, including the governor of the central bank or his nominee, including the inspector general of police or his nominee, including the director general of the...
In the interest of fairness and justice, should this go to trial, should the chairman of the acting chairman of the commission just resign, having seen the way previous people have happened? He may not return to this office after all.
If I may say this, Chamberlain, if at the end of the day, mind you, and I like the way Mr. Abiodun put it, it's an inquiry. If he's indicted, that is the end of his career. They could do one or two things. Either allow him to resign and go back to his police force, or he on his own might decide that, look, I don't want to continue in this office. I also don't want to continue as a police officer. And then he resigns. And that's the end of his service to the nation. That if the government now decides that is indeed a weighty allegation that has been substantiated, what will happen then is criminal prosecution might commence. Because if you notice, the allegations made against him might be weighty. Now, if it is substantiated and confirmed, the government can decide to prosecute him. Now, there's also an aspect that Mr. Abiodun could touch, and that's something that is so very vital that we also need to address. And that is the fact that, just like President Barack Obama said, the greatest challenge to Africa is that we are not building institutions, but building personalities. And it's something that we also need to address. We need to have strong institutions and not strong personalities. You recall that we've had, every now and again, there's always a comparison. Oh, during Nuhu Ribadu's era, these were the things that EFCC was able to do. Now, comparing Nuhu Ribadu with Waziri, now when Magu leaves, the next question is, who would then be appointed to man the affairs of the EFCC? Then there's going to be also a comparison. But in fairness, this particular time, the agency has also been very effective. Now, the aspect of accountability, which Mr. Femi Falana has also touched, is something that we think that should be looked into. The time has come. Now, the agency was seen as an agency that was not submitting itself to being investigated, to internal inquiry. I quite agree that there's also a need to have an ombudsman, a policeman watching the policeman. So it's also like in other civilized crimes, you have internal control, you have internal affairs. They also investigate agencies of government saddled with the responsibility of enforcement. And my conclusion will simply be this. Professor Wadialo said sometime back said, the greatest challenge to us as a people is not in want of rules, regulations, and laws. It is the attitude. I do not see, for instance, the chairman of the EFCC, right, investigating a sitting president. I don't see that happening. I also don't see the chairman, for instance, inviting either the vice president or even you could see sometimes governors have been investigated, but this particular chairman, in fairness to him, he was quite effective. But the greatest challenge now is when he leaves, the next person will come, will be rattled by what he has gone through. You recall that Mr. Falana talked about Nuhu Ribadu. Some people might decide that, look, I don't want to be scandalized. I don't want to be disgraced. I would rather not take this appointment. And so you have a situation where people who are willing to serve will not make themselves available. You remember the case of Grade, former Minister for Health, and what she said about public service and how it has and scars those who are willing to come in and serve. So for me, we need to develop institutions and not individuals.
All right, then, Mr. Norris Quakers, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, as well as Mr. Femi Falana, also a Senior Advocate of Nigeria. And unfortunately, we couldn't reconnect with Mr. Abiodun Uwonikoko, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. So maybe we may try at a later date. But we thank you all, gentlemen, for talking to us today.
Professor Idris Bugaje, Professor of Engineering, joins us now to talk about the recently commissioned Abuja-Kaduna Kogi pipeline. Thank you for joining us this morning. Well, this is definitely one infrastructure to look forward to, and of course, it's something that's been done by governments and, of course, in collaboration with the private sector. How significant an infrastructural development is this in the whole infrastructure gap we have?
Well, thank you very much. This is a major milestone in infrastructural development in Nigeria. It is part, of course, of the larger national gas pipeline network, and also part of the Trans-Saharan network, which intends to deliver natural gas to Europe across the Sahara. So, but the effect of this is it is going to turn around the economy very effectively, provided we make good use of the opportunity. So I think it is a major infrastructural milestone, and I hope the private sector will seize on this opportunity to develop the relevant industries, utilizing natural gas to produce several products that will help the economy pick up and improve.
Start, but you've mentioned the private sector, to which we will come, but could you please give us some other things in the value chain of this Ajaokuta-Kaduna-Kogi gas pipeline?
Well, the Ajaokuta-Kaduna-Kano AKK gas pipeline is going to deliver about 3.5 billion cubic feet of natural gas daily, which means a little over 1 trillion of natural gas every year. And, you know, the natural gas reserves in Nigeria is about 200 trillion cubic feet, proven reserves. And then the unproven ones are about 400 trillion, so totally 600 trillion. So out of that, of course, we already have gas pipelines reaching out to Ogun, Lagos, you know, cross rivers and rivers, etc. Some even going to the West African coastline. I mean, the importance of this is that we have an opportunity for power generation. We have an opportunity for petrochemical plants. But in my opinion, we should put more attention to petrochemical plants. This is because power generation, at the moment, the national grid is unable to even cope with the existing thermal power plants. We have about 13 new IPPs all over the country, especially in the southern states of the country where the gas is close by. But at the moment, out of the 13 gigawatts or 13,000 megawatts of power that could be generated from the GENCOs, only 7,000 could be handled by the national grid. And for that reason, adding more power plants may not help the situation. Federal government must find ways to upgrade the national grid before new generation plants are put, you know, online. So for that reason, I would suggest the AKK should be geared towards petrochemicals, things like urea fertilizer. Today, Nigeria is importing a good proportion of what we consume of urea fertilizer. And the federal government has a very ambitious, silent agricultural, you know, revolution going on. And I believe there is need to consolidate that by producing the urea fertilizer locally. This can be produced easily from natural gas. We have other products, things like methanol, formaldehyde, urea, I have mentioned urea, ammonia, nitric acid, several other petrochemicals. The list is endless. So these are all opportunities that are available. And it is now time for the states through which this pipeline is passing through to call for an investment roundtable. They invite the private sector. They discuss the incentives they are going to provide to the private sector so that the private sector can start to invest in these different ventures. Even if we concentrate on urea, I believe it is going to make a very significant impact on the agriculture and the national economy generally. It will create a lot of employment opportunities. And this is what the country.
If I may comment, yes, you have mentioned these opportunities. I mean, power, for example, you mentioned other opportunities. But for some people, they're looking ahead. So we have 24 months to complete this, 2 years, to be precise. Something it might even go beyond that. There's also the funding aspects, the economic viability. There is the security situation. I mean, this is meant to be Ajaokuta, Kaduna, Kano, and you understand that the security situation in the country obviously needs a lot of attention right now. So yes, the opportunities are there, but clearly there are challenges. Have you factored some of these challenges in also, and how huge a role will they play in completing this project and ensuring it is viable to repay back in 12 years?
Well, I think the challenges will always be there. But you see, it is these very industries that we are going to create with this gas that will address some of those challenges. A lot of this insecurity we face in this country is due to unemployment across the whole country, especially in the north, where the insecurity is more endemic. And I think this is the first time we are bringing gas to the core north. And I believe it's going to make a lot of impact. Not only those new industries, even the present industries can be connected. Look at Kakuri, Kaduna, which is an industrial hub. Why don't we get those gas pipelines across to the textiles and other industries that are in Kakuri so that they can now find alternative ways of powering those machines? Because natural gas is as good or even better than the conventional liquid fuels that we use in running some of those machineries, because it burns much cleaner and is better for the environment. So challenges will always be there in any developing country, even in the developed world there are challenges. But I believe it is these industries that will solve the very problems we are talking about. And I think 2 years is enough time for us to organize and get the private sector on board and try to build the relevant industries. Designs of these plants have already been done by chemical engineers across the country. I remember about 5 years ago, we did a design for urea plant from coal. So the changes will not be very significant when you are changing the raw material from coal to natural gas. So within these 2 years, we should try to mobilize the private sector. There are a lot of them that are indigenous, Dangote Group and the rest of them, and there are also others that can be brought from outside so that we can quickly get these industries in place, and then the gas will be supplied and we'll be able to create employment, secure the country, and also improve on the GDP of the country, especially at this moment when we are facing very serious challenges from COVID and other factors.
Well, you've talked about the federal government, and you also mentioned the states and the private sectors. But a critical category in all of this are the communities through which this 614-kilometer-long pipeline will pass through. And that perhaps is the reason for my colleague's question about the safety and security of these. What kind of buy-in do you think the states can give to these communities to make it part of their own, to own the process as well?
Well, the communities need to be sensitized. Gas pipelines are not like crude oil pipelines or petroleum products pipelines. Everybody should realize any pipeline passing through the community must guard it, simply because an accident with a gas pipeline can spell a lot of doom for that community. And therefore, they need to be sensitized. They need to also, as you mentioned, take ownership of that pipeline. And we can use modern technology, using ICT, to monitor the gas pipelines so that before any infractions happen, we can be able now to contain it. This is very essential. But I don't see any problem really moving the gas pipeline from Jakarta down to Kano, simply because what is being conveyed in those gas pipelines are not something that somebody can go with a jerry can to collect. These are natural gas, and people should realize the danger of natural gas. If not for the indiscipline we have in this country, otherwise I would even recommended extending the natural gas pipelines to domestic homes.
Well, just as you said, Professor, perhaps the critical thing here is ensuring that we give the communities the necessary buy-in. Otherwise, I mean, it's just a pipeline as far as many of them are concerned. But we have to thank you very much, Idris Bugaje, Professor of Engineering. Thank you so much for your thoughts this morning.
It's a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much. All the best.
All right, we're back to take on your own contribution to the program today. Please stay with us.
Welcome back. Well, some comments coming through now. Dr. Alabi, what he's trying to say here, he says the EFCC, in terms of the state headquarters of the EFCC, we should also equally pay attention to activities and or operations there. He thinks there's some corrupt practices also go on in those areas. That's Dr. Alabi Taiwo.
Well, Prof. Edayana says that EFCC must be strengthened so that Nigerians don't perceive the institution only as witch-hunting institution out to fight dissenting voices. Thus, his trial, he's talking about Mr. Magu's trial, should be open, charges should be clear and reasonable. Let an independent panel be constituted for his trials.
And this is Idris Shehu saying either political or legal, I believe allegations as much as 22 counts should be investigated. Let's not forget that this same presidency stood by Mr. Magu when some people were clamoring for his head. So let's just wait for the outcome of the investigation.
Let's look at this mail. I'm not saying who it's from now, but it says, how can somebody be acting chairman for more than 4 years without confirmation? This is illegality and a very bad precedent for the country. Yeah, very bad precedent for the country. What is the legal or standard or normal duration or limitation for acting executive position? It's a question. He also says, also will advise NMA in Cross River State to advise the State Commissioner for Health to resign and National NMA to investigate and apply necessary sanctions on her for unprofessional conduct as a medical doctor or caregiver by putting the lives of the people in danger for the continuous denial of COVID-19 present in the state. Well, I don't know if this person's stance will change considering the fact that 5 cases have not been recorded in Cross River State.
Well, Baban Zara, we get your comments. You're cautious now that the EU and UK are opening their borders for developing countries and Nigeria. He thinks that, look, we should keep a close eye on those COVID-19 figures and status. It might be instructive. Well, there you go. That is the show today. We thank you all for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain. What's up?
I'm Kayode Okikelu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Do stay safe.
And please be responsible out there. I know it's difficult when you're the only one wearing a mask, but wear it anyway. Thank you for watching. I'm Mao Yusuf.